All right, people. So for this next project, we are going to create atmospheric perspective landscapes within GRAVIT. Atmospheric perspective just refers to the effect that light and atmosphere have on objects and land as they're viewed from a distance. So objects that are far away from you would appear duller and lighter in color, whereas things like land and objects that are closer to you would be darker and more saturated in color. So this is a good example. We're just making like 4 layers of land and then sky, just like this one. Again, the layers of land that are closer to the viewer are going to be more saturated in color and will be, closer to fully saturated and darker on the color picker, whereas color or pieces of land and objects that are further away from you would be up closer to the top of the color picker in like the lighter areas. So here's another good example. And once we get past making these layers of land, then in future assignments, we'll make like bushes and trees or even buildings for our landscape. So let's just get started by making a new design. We're going to make a US letter portrait. Is that right? Oh, landscape. So I'm going to switch it over here in the page options to make it portrait. All right. And then, so the first thing we're going to do is just pick a color for our sky and color the page that color. So if you click on the outside of your composition, these page options come up, and I'm just going to pick like a blue for my sky, a light blue, because this is the furthest from the viewer. All right, and now we're going to use the pen tool to make our layers of land. So if you just click on the edge of the composition up at the top, it'll put down an anchor point. And we all know by now, if you just click, it's going to make straight lines at angles. So go around the bottom of your composition to make those. And then when you're making your horizon line, you're practicing making curves with the pen tool. So instead of just clicking, you want to click and drag to pull out those direction handles and get a little bit more comfortable using those direction handles and controlling the pen to make curves. You don't have to be perfect because you're not tracing anything, but it's just good practice with the pen tool to make curves. So you want to make a horizon line. You want to close the path off by clicking the exactly where you started. So there we go. I made a shape. That's my horizon line. And now I'm going to color it. So in order to do that, I'm just going to use the color picker and use the same color that I used for the sky. So it's the same color. And then I'm just going to go back to the fills in the color picker in here and then just drag down that color a little bit to darken it. That's it. And then I'm gonna continue. The trick is if you have this path is already selected, and if you click on the edge of your composition, you're gonna end up clicking onto the path. So you just have to switch to that pointer tool and like deselect that path, and then go back to the pen tool and start another layer. Again, you just start by clicking at the edge of your composition, and then click the bottom corners to go all the way around. And then when you're ready to make like your horizon line, you're clicking and dragging to make curves. You make tall mountains, or you can make kind of low hills. You can experiment with them. Sometimes I get to a point where I don't like it, and then I want to like delete part, so I just hit backspace, and then I go with the pen tool, select that last anchor point, and then drag, and then you can continue it. So one more time, if you don't like the last point, you can hit delete or backspace on your keyboard, and then to pick up where you left off, you click on where you want to pick it up from and drag, and the pen should continue with that line, making that path. And then you just close it off. It'll turn that white automatically, and you sample the color that's next to it, or the last color that you were working from, and that next layer is just a little bit darker. So we just keep going a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker. And again, so this path right here is selected, and if I just go and click, I'm actually just adding anchor points to that path. We want to make a new path and fill it with a different color. So you have to deselect it. You just use the select tool and click away from the composition on the gray area, and now you can see it's not selected in the layers palette, and you're ready to make a new path. So you hit the pen tool, P for the pen tool, and again, just click on the edge of the composition, go around the bottom. I'm not making curves yet. And then when you're ready to do the horizon line, I want you to really get a little bit more comfortable using the pen tool. So click and drag to make those curves. Click and drag. The further you drag, the more drastic that curve is going to get. You keep going. You just make hills. It might look like a Dr. Seuss kind of book, but that's okay. So again, it turns white, and you sample the color that's right above it, and then go back to that color in the color picker and make it a little bit darker so you can see it. Right? And again, that path right here is selected, and if you just keep going, you're going to end up just adding anchor points to it. It's a little tricky, so you want to like kind of deselect that path. The best way to do it is just grab the select tool and click away. So now this path right here, the one that I just made, is not selected, and you can go with the pen tool. If it does get in your way, and you know, you find yourself selecting paths that you don't want, you know that in the layers palette right over here, all these 3 paths, you can lock them. So if you just lock them, then you can't select them. They're not going to go anywhere, and you won't be able to add anchor points to them. So again, I have 1, 2, 3. I'm going for 4 layers of land, so I'm just going to do one more. I'm going to use the pen tool, click around the bottom, and then when I'm making like the horizon line, I am clicking and dragging to make curves. All right, and then we are going to sample the color that was right above it, and then go back to the color picker, and then just pull that color down a little bit. So the last layer, or the layer that's closest to you, should be pretty dark. If you want to make it all the way black, that's okay. It can be a silhouette, that's fine. But in general, the darker the color, the closer it is to you. So you want to save those lighter colors for the background and the layers of land that are furthest from you. So once you get to this point, you're in good shape. I would just recommend that you get rid of the borders. So what I did was I just unlocked everything, and then I'm going to select all of my paths. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 paths. You can click and drag right on your composition, or you can click in your layers palette and then hold down Shift to click the bottom one, so they're all selected. And then where it says borders underneath fills, you just click next to that color picker, so you highlight the borders and hit trash. So you trashed all the borders, and now you just have this pretty simple atmospheric perspective, and you're ready to make buildings and trees and everything else that you want in your landscape. But you have the colors down, and you have the land created. So at this point, you just save it, and that's it. You're going to submit it. So I'm going to save it to my GRAVIT cloud as atmospheric perspective. Probably have to do atmospheric perspective number 2, or yeah, I'll do sample on a Walt atmospheric perspective. That's it, and that's you can submit a JPEG for this assignment.